to have direct contact, obviously, with President Trump.
You have proposed that big polluters pay consumers through a carbon credit market with the industrial pricing system. So you get rid of the carbon tax for consumers, and you would put this in place instead. How would you ensure, though, that those costs aren't passed on to consumers?
So there's a couple of things. First, and just to be clear, in terms of removing the consumer carbon tax, that also means we're removing the carbon tax for small, medium-sized enterprises, for farms and others, basically everyone up to 50 kilotons of emissions. So it's the large polluters that pay. Now, those large polluters today, what they try to do is reduce their own emissions. If they don't get to certain levels, depending on the sector, they pay the producer carbon tax, the OPBS system as a whole, as you know. They have an option to buy carbon credits, which reduces the tax they pay. That market doesn't function very well. That carbon credit market doesn't function very well. So what we're actually doing here is improving the market, improving how it functions, adding additional credits, so additional options for those large polluters. They could buy these credits. This federal government will stand in between. And what's going to be new is a series of new incentives for households to reduce those emissions.
It still sounds to me, though, that there's an opportunity for companies to pass that on to consumers.
Well, just to be clear, them buying credits reduces their costs. It helps Canadians reduce their own emissions. Now, take a big step back and look at the overall producer carbon price. And let's take the example of the steel industry. So there's a carbon price on steel. To the extent to which that's paid, yes, that does show up in the cost, for example, of an automobile. Now, let's put this into proportions. If you look at a $25,000 or less car, the cost, if you replaced all the steel and it became green steel, so no carbon steel, which is an extreme version of what we're talking about here, it's less than $200 additional price. So it's something, but it's not much. That's
okay, but you acknowledge that the consumer would pay more at some point.
Well, the consumer is already paying more. Just to be clear, the consumer is already paying more. These are marginal amounts, and two things are happening. One, with our plan, is that it gives the companies more options. It gives households, Canadian households who are hard-pressed. Look, I was across the prairies, it's minus 30 in the prairies. It'd be good to be able to insulate your house better, to drive other efficiencies. So it helps that.